Okay, this is the last chapter. So after this, you guys are all finished as far as the lectures are concerned. So we're talking about chapter 17, learning and memory, biological perspective, and we have the cranes, the Japanese cranes. This chapter is going to talk about memory and behavior, of course. As humans learning how to get along in the society that we have created takes a lifetime. Our memory is the culmination of our ability to learn about life and life circumstances. It is our memory that allows us to act appropriately in situations. If we kill someone or drive on the left side of the road, we will be taken out of society either through death or incarceration. Our memory dictates our behavior. Oddly, psychologists and medical doctors have been able to trace and map the memory process using individuals who have damaged select areas of their brain due to tumors, lesions, or trauma. These insults to the brain cause lapses of memory that, looked at in toto, construct a memory map of the process. To the process. Wrong preposition. Skill learning. Learning to perform a task requires motor coordination. These are the types of learning. Priming. Exposure to stimulus facilitates subsequent responses to the same or similar stimulus. Conditioning, an individual comes to associate two stimuli or a stimulus and a response, and that is what conditioning is all about. How do animals learn? Edward Tolman has hypothesized through research with rats that they create a cognitive map in their minds from experience. And as you can see, here we have a rat trying to figure out how to get his food, and they can put it in different places in the map. The rat knows the route that he's supposed to take. Tolman was also able to prove that rats had knowledge that, unless tested, could not be discounted. This knowledge he referred to as latent learning. Tolman later wrote that different kinds of learning may follow different laws. Latent learning has to do with if we're driving down the road and let's see what can happen. We see the guy in front of us pop off the road, and then he tries to steer back onto the road, and he does it too quickly. He pops over to the other side of the road and crashes in the other ditch. So we learn not to do that. It's not like we learned it. We didn't learn it because we did it. We learned not to do that because we saw them do it, and that's known as latent learning, where you learn something without actually ever having experienced it. And that's latent learning. Different types of memory. Iconic memory is brief memory of an image. It's part of the short-term memory, your iconic memory. The memory of sound is known as echoic memory. It's part of your short-term memory as well. Your short-term memory is iconic, echoic, or cognitive memory that lasts for about 30 seconds if unrehearsed. Intermediate term memories, some psychologists refer to memories that may last longer than the short term, an hour or a day, say, but are not put in long-term memory as intermediate term memory. Long-term memory, of course, is permanent memory, memories that last the rest of an individual's life. And they're in there somewhere. All you have to do is find the right cue to bring them forth, to bring them to your conscious mind. The capacities of long-term memories are almost limitless. Research shows that college students can recognize 50,000 words. People who learn a second language acquire 100,000 items of knowledge. Memory trace is the path that memories are placed in the long-term memory. Memory trace, of course, is one of the things that we're trying to learn so that we can either accelerate the process or so that we can block the process if need be. And we're going to talk about that when we talk about PTSD, about blocking memory. blocking things that stick in your memory, trying to get rid of things that are in there. The more severe the damage to the medial temporal lobe, the more impaired the ability to establish new memories. Work with people with hippocampal damage shows that the hippocampus is probably the final location of memory formation. These individuals can still support some degree of cortex memory formation. One system includes there are three neural memory systems. One system includes the hippocampus. This system acquires information about relationships among stimuli and events. And of course, now we refer to that as declarative memory. There's a system that includes the dorsal striatum. And the dorsal striatum, oh, there it is. Dorsal striatum is right here. This system mediates the formation of reinforced stimulus response associations. These are your habits or your non-declarative memories. There's a system that includes your amygdala. This system mediates rapid acquisition of behaviors on the basis of biologically significant events with effective properties, events that arouse emotion. So if you're at a football game and somebody that's sitting beside you jumps up and cheers and they come down with their elbow in your face, ouch, that hurts, and you get angry. The next time you won't sit that close to anybody because there's always especially that guy, because there's always a possibility that that guy is going to elbow you. That's how you learn things like that. It doesn't take you very often. It doesn't take you 2 times before you figure out if I touch the oven when it's red, that pretty color of red, that potentially I'm going to burn myself. It only takes 1 time of trying to touch that red spot on the oven before you know that's hot and you need to stay away from it. And that happens because your amygdala, because it hurts. You're angry that it happened, and of course the next time you won't do it that way. Researchers have found that animals who cache food have neurons in the hippocampus that are activated when they get into a particular location where they have cached food. These neurons are referred to as place cells. These spatial view cells are seen in the larger hippocampuses of birds who cache food. You may have experienced this yourself. If you have driven someplace, say that you're driving to Denver, Colorado, and you've only been there once, but you remember seeing this over here, and you remember seeing that over there. So the next time you need to go to the same place, and you're driving through that area in Denver, potentially you remember, oh, that's on my left. Yeah, I must be in the right place, and that thing's over there on my right, and that's where it was before. I'm getting close to where I want to go. This has happened to me because we have traveled all over the United States. Because we've lived all over the United States, I can go to Omaha and I can find my way around Omaha because we lived there for, oh golly, how long did we live there? We lived there for about 8 years. I can find my way around Oklahoma City, kind of, because we lived there for 4 years. I can find my way around Columbus, Mississippi. I can find my way around Indianapolis. I can find my way around Muncie, of course, because I grew up there. Probably I can't find my way around Dayton because we really never went to Dayton when I was stationed at Wright Pat. Riverside, I still remember things about Riverside. Actually, we lived over the hill from Riverside, but I remember Riverside, California. I used to go to college at the University of California, Riverside. Yeah, I can remember a lot. I can probably make my way around Montana. I've been to just about every place in Montana because we lived there for 10 years. I can find my way around Davenport, Iowa. That's where we don't really live there. We live out in the country, but I can find my way around Clinton. I used to work there. It's wherever you've been, those memories stay in your head and they become place memories. So if you're looking for that hamburger joint, if I'm thinking of going to McDonald's in Oklahoma City, I know where McDonald's is. It's on the corner. It's in the corner as you're leaving the base, so I could figure out where it is, and it's the same way with these animals. When they get close to something, something tells them where their food is, and we as humans, of course, have the same ability. Encoding: when information is properly encoded, there are two areas of the brain that are activated when the memory is remembered: your prefrontal cortex and your parahippocampal cortex. And of course, your parahippocampal cortex is this thing right here, and there's your prefrontal cortex is right here, right in the front. Pictures are remembered in the right prefrontal cortex and both hemispheres of the parahippocampal cortex. Words are remembered in the left prefrontal cortex and the left hemisphere of the parahippocampal cortex. And this is one of the reasons why when you get hit in the head, if you're playing football and you come out with a possible concussion, one of the things that we will say to you is, how many fingers am I holding up? For one thing, we want to make sure that you can count, that your eyesight isn't messed up, that your pictures aren't messed up from the right side of the front of your brain. But we also want to make sure that you can understand what we're saying, that you can understand the words that we've spoken. If you've ever had a concussion, you know that depending on where the concussion was in your head, maybe you didn't understand the spoken word, and this may have lasted until the swelling went down in your brain. Hopefully that's never happened to you, but that's one of the reasons why we do what we do. If you're hit on the side of the head, it may interrupt your hearing or the way that you hear things, so that you can't really hear. So it really all depends. And this is one of the reasons why we check people out if they get hit in the head. The hippocampal system is not a repository of long-term memory. Permanent storage is thought to occur in regions of the neocortex where the information is first processed and held in short-term memory. This information is further processed in the medial temporal region, but this area is not the location of long-term memory either, merely an area of consolidation. Imaging research has verified two regions of the brain used in establishing declarative memory: the medial temporal lobe and the diencephalic system. The diencephalon is, where did I see that? I don't see the words. Anyway, the diencephalon is this area right here. That's where your diencephalon is. Medial temporal lobe, medial. That's the middle of your temporal lobe, and your temporal lobe is right there. This is the medial temporal lobe, and your diencephalon is this structure right here. I can't see it in there. I don't know why I put those pictures in there if they're not there. Encoding takes place in the rostral region of the hippocampal area. Retrieving episodic memory are located primarily in the caudal portions of the hippocampus. Encoding takes place in the rostral regions of the hippocampal area. Retrieving episodic memories are located primarily in the caudal portions of the hippocampus, and we'll be showing you those in just a second. Looking at models of encoding and retrieval of the same information, researchers and theorists ponder if the two systems aren't identical, and of course that has to do with your memory trace. There are three types of skill memory that researchers have delved into to discover brain areas involved in them: sensory motor skills, perceptual skills, and cognitive skills. Imaging of people performing skills from memory show that there are three areas activated in this process: the basal ganglia, which is this area right here, the cerebellum, which is this area right here, and the motor neocortex, which is that area right here. Amnesia is severe memory impairment, but memory is seldom complete. In other words, you remember some things, you just can't remember everything. Retrograde amnesia is back in time from incident. The retro means back, grade means time, retrograde from your incident, so you can't remember from before the accident occurred. I can't remember all of the ones passed after a select incident. You can't remember before the accident. Anterograde amnesia, forward in time from incident. They can establish some or any new memories after an incident, and that's anterograde amnesia. And what normally happens when somebody gets a blow to the head and they have amnesia, it's either retrograde amnesia, where they can't remember what happened before the blow to the head, or they can't remember what happened after what happened, depending on how severe the blow is. See, what normally happens when you get hit in the head and it causes your brain to ricochet back and forth in your skull, what tends to happen is you get, it's not really bruising, but it's blows to the area, and because of that, that area swells up. It fills with fluid, and if it has to do with memory from the past, then you can't remember the past. If it has to do with creating new memories, now all of a sudden you can't remember, you can't create new memories. Now normally what happens is that amnesia will go away after a period of time, and the reason it goes away after a period of time is because that swelling goes down. As soon as the swelling goes down, then that area of the brain, as long as it's not destroyed by the fluid, the excess fluid in the area, then all of a sudden you get your memory back. So, and that's one of the reasons why they play those games on television. They talk about he had amnesia for 3 years, which can potentially happen if that area of the brain, if the swelling doesn't actually go down. I mean, people can be in comas because of swelling for however long the swelling is there, for 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, if that's the type of blow to the head. That's usually what's causing all your problems, is swelling. Normally, and the brain cells are really sensitive to swelling, and that's one of the reasons why we get so many interesting reactions. Forms of amnesia, anterograde and retrograde amnesia. And it really all depends on how fast you can heal and what the circumstance is behind whatever happened to you. When H.M. was 16 years old, he developed seizures. By the age of 27, the seizures were so bad that he had to quit work. Medication could no longer control his problem. A neurosurgeon determined that both temporal lobes were involved. He excised most of the anterior temporal lobe, the amygdala, and hippocampus in both hemispheres of his brain. H.M. can't remember anything from 10 years before his operation. This is retrograde amnesia. H.M. only has short-term memory and can't establish any new long-term memories. And this is anterograde amnesia. Now remember the portions of the brain that the individual lost. He lost his amygdala, his anterior temporal lobe, and his hippocampus. So he can't create new memories. He lost a portion of his old memories because of the anterior temporal lobe, and of course he lost his amygdala. So he can't he can't become excited and remember things because of the excitement. There are 2 types of memory. Declarative memory represents information acquired by learning. These are the facts that you know, the trivia that you have accumulated over your lifetime. And procedural memory, things that people know that they can show by doing. H.M. could not form new declarative memories, but he could form new procedural memories. which is really kind of interesting. So riding a bike, for example, you could probably ride a bike because that's procedural memory. You get up onto the bike and you start pedaling and you balance yourself. That's procedural memory. He could probably remember how to drill a hole with a drill. Turn the drill on, put the drill next to the wood, and then you push down. That's procedural memory. You could probably remember how to drive a car because that's procedural memory. And I'm not sure why I have that picture, nor why I have that picture. After HM's case became widely known, cases of similar results came to the attention of the medical community. Herpes simplex viruses can, on rare occasions, destroy tissue of the medial temporal lobe, causing similar results. Now, the type of herpes simplex we're talking about, there's two different types of herpes simplex. Actually, there's lots of different types of herpes simplex, but the two that have to do with sex have genital herpes and oral herpes. Oral herpes is the sores you get in your mouth and on your lips. That's oral herpes, and but the genital herpes destroys tissue. And if you get the genital herpes, normally you don't get the genital herpes anyplace except in your genital region. But if you get it, if it somehow gets into another portion of your body, like in your brain, in your medial temporal lobe, it will cause abscesses. And that is the genital herpes that is causing the problem. This is very, very rare because normally genital herpes is just in that area, and oral herpes, actually you can get oral herpes in your genital region, but it's like warts. If you have warts on your hands, you're not going to scratch your leg and get warts on your leg. It just doesn't work that way. Or warts on your feet. When I was growing up, I had warts on the bottoms of my feet, but I didn't have warts anywhere else. How does that happen? I mean, they itched and I'd scratch them. So why didn't I get warts all over my body? And the answer is because that's cytomegalovirus, and cytomegalovirus is specific to certain areas of your body. Herpes is the same way, but every once in a while, on rare occasions, it would get into another area of your body and it would actually grow. Ischemia is reduced blood flow to the brain, as in the case of stroke or heart attack. It can damage the medial temporal lobe, causing similar results. Encephalitis, inflammation of the brain, causes similar results to what happened with HM. NA was messing around with a miniature foil used in fencing, and this is a picture of two individuals with miniature foils. Somehow the sword entered his nostril and skewered him through his sinus cavities and into his diencephalon. Oh, there's the diencephalon. Doggone it. I thought I had a picture of it back before. The injury damaged the dorsomedial thalamus, destroyed the mammillary body, and created lesions on the hypothalamus that destroyed 2/3 of the organ. NA suffered anterograde amnesia. NA's short-term memory was intact, but his declarative memory was absent, though he had procedural memory once again. We're done with NA. Okay, Korsakoff syndrome is a profound amnesia caused with chronic use of alcohol. There is deterioration in the diencephalon, hippocampus, amygdala, and some of the frontal cortex. The problem is that the liver is so busy processing alcohol, but because they stay drunk almost all the time, it doesn't do a proper job processing your vitamins, especially B1, also known as thiamine. Chronic alcoholics will often display a marked retrograde amnesia. Curiously, alcoholics will often fill in the missing information with fantastic stories that are either constructed from their stuporous inebriated state or suggested by someone else. This fantasy memory is referred to as confabulation, and they will come up with the oddest stories that you've ever heard. We used to get these guys in the emergency room all the time. They would come in and they would say they just saw, President Reagan driving down the street, and he was in a monster truck, all kinds of goofy stuff. Well, this is after Reagan had died. What in the world's going on here? Or they saw Elvis, that kind of stuff. Confabulation. Work by Estonian scientist Endel Tulving led to a bifurcation of declarative memory, facts and information, into two types. He's the one that came up with the idea of semantic memory and episodic memory. Semantic memory is generalized information. That's the trivia that you know. And episodic memory is the things you know about yourself. Autobiographical memory that makes up an individual's personal history. So episodic memory is you, and semantic memory is everything else that you know. Casey sustained brain injuries due to a traffic accident. After the accident, Casey suffered damage to the frontal parietal cerebral cortex, damage to the right parietal occipital cerebral cortex, severe shrinkage of the hippocampus, and severe shrinkage of the parahippocampal cortex. I put this in here because this is a head trauma. This guy's got a fractured skull, as you can see. It's quite extensive. A lot of times, fractured skulls will cause death because the brain is so damaged. I don't think this guy's dead, though, but you can see the fracture. It's right there. Due to the damage, Casey lost his ability to recall episodic or autobiographical memories. Casey still maintains semantic memory, but he can't remember who he is. The problem seems to be in the damage to his cortex, not the damage to his hippocampus. Researchers feel that it is the frontal parietal damage that causes the loss of memory, which is really kind of interesting. I was reading, I used to teach in social work, and we were talking about children that are abused by their parents. And one of the problems is that they don't do very well in school. And it's not that they don't do very well in school because they are so upset. They are upset, but that's not the problem. The problem is that when you hit a child in his head, if you slap them, then the damage is done to their frontal parietal region of their brain, and that causes memory problems. And they were saying that, a select number of, they did CAT scans on people that were in prison. And then they went back and in their history, and what they discovered was these kids had been knocked around by their parents, especially their fathers had hit them in the head. Of course, you certainly, if you're gonna hit somebody, you certainly don't want to hit them in the head. But if you hit them in the head, you certainly don't want to hit them in the front of the head. If you don't want to hit them in the forehead, that old V8 commercial where the guy pops himself in his forehead. Probably not the best idea in the world. Memory can be divided into two structured stages: iconic and echoic memory. Initial presentation of a stimulus arrives in the brain as a momentary stimulation that can readily disappear. Iconic or echoic memory. Short-term memory is iconic or echoic memory that the individual seeks to maintain. This may last for a minute or so. Intermediate memory, short-term memory that you are able to hold because of its novel subject, or that is readily organized in the brain. For example, a weather report. As a matter of fact, I looked at the weather report for next week. I was worried about, my wife is traveling down to Georgia to help her cousin recover from knee surgery. And I was worried that the weather would be bad when she traveled down to Georgia. And I remember, this is because it's novel, I won't remember next week, or potentially I won't remember 2 weeks from now what the weather was like on that select Monday that my wife left for Georgia. But I will remember it probably through next week until it actually happens. And that's because it's an intermediate memory. It's not like I'm going to go back in 2022 and try to remember what the weather was like on December 1st. That's December 1st of 2020. That's just not going to happen. That information will be gone. It was in my intermediate memory, and now it's no longer in there. It hasn't gone into my long-term memory. Long-term memory is shorter duration memory that is placed in a more permanent area of the cerebral cortex, where it may be recalled days, months, or even years after the fact. This isn't novel enough for me to remember. The weather report from November, what is today, the 21st, about the weather on December 1st. It's just not novel enough for me to remember for an extended length of time. It's not anything that needs to go into permanent memory. But I was reading today, what was I reading today? I was reading about, I was actually reading about bubonic plague. It's caused by a bacteria called Yersinia pestis, nothing that anybody cares about. The plague isn't around anymore, so we don't have to worry about it. But that's in my permanent memory. I learned it. I learned about Yersinia pestis when I was in lab school back in 1972, and I still remember it to this day. I still remember what the bacteria that causes syphilis, and I think it was in this class. I was trying to think of it last week, what the bacteria was called. It's called Treponema pallidum. It's a spirochete. It's the one that's the spirochete. But I learned that when I was in the military, and I was a lab tech. All these things that you see, this is all in permanent memory. Once upon a time, I was looking at a stool specimen, and I found a operculum from it's an egg that has an operculum on it, which is like a cap on the egg, and this was for a Chinese liver fluke, and that operculum, the top of it pops off, and it's not mature yet, but it's a immature worm will come out. That's actually a fluke, which looks like golly, how can I explain it? Well, anyway, I can still remember all of these things, and I learned them back when I was in the service, back in 1971, 1972. It's in my permanent memory, and it's still there because I learned it back then. There are still things I remember from my bachelor degree days and my associate degree days and my master degree days. I hope I can remember some of those things. A lot of that stuff has changed. I have a master's degree in political science, and at the time, we were studying about communism. And of course, there's only 3 or 4 communist countries left. But at that time, democracy, of course, was trying to face off against communism. The Soviet Union was still intact, and communism was trying to take over the world. This is during the Cold War. Anyway, I don't know why I'm talking about these things. Long-term memory can be accomplished using several techniques. Skill learning challenging tasks over several sessions. Priming, stimuli that is altered due to previous exposure to the same or similar stimuli. Conditioning, tying a stimulus response to a reward or punishment. There are 2 different types of conditioning. Classical conditioning, where you tie a stimulus response to an unconditioned stimulus, and operant conditioning, where you tie a stimulus response to a reward or a punishment. I'm not a very mechanically minded person, but I have to put steps on we bought a new truck over the summer, and it's too tall to get into for my wife. She has hip problems. She had both of her hips replaced. So I need to put a step in my new truck. It's listen to this. It's a 1997 Dodge Dakota, but it only has like 30,000 miles on it. I mean, this was a great purchase. But now I need to put those steps in there so my wife can get into the truck. She can get in, but it's a bit of a struggle. She's not very tall. I'm only 5'6". She's 5'4", but she has short legs and short arms. It's really kind of interesting. Long torso, short arms, short legs. So I need to put those steps in, and I read the instructions, and now I've got to. I don't have to remember it. I have the instructions, but I'm still thinking. Oh, I need that 3/8 inch drill bit to drill a hole in my. I'm just hoping I don't make mistakes, because as I said, I'm not very mechanically minded. Research indicates that every time a memory is called up, there is a potential for distortion. New memories or new information may change the structure of the memory. The structures of questions of memories can further plant false memories. Some people are quite susceptible to false memories, stories made up by authorities, for example. And if you listen to the news, a lot of times you're not listening to the news, you're listening to opinions and analyses. And that's opinions and analyses are just that. They're opinions and their analyses, but they may not be the news. So, we have that problem, especially now since the election. In one study, 25% of the respondents accepted the false memories. And this may be one of the problems. Today's November 21st. The election was on the 3rd. They declared Joe Biden the winner, I don't know, on the 5th or the 6th. It was Saturday. So let's see. If the 3rd was Tuesday, that's the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. That was the 7th of November. But President Trump won't concede the election. He keeps saying it was rigged and they cheated. And he knows that the more you say a lie, the more people will believe it, because they forget what the context is and they just remember the lie. So these are the false memories that we talk about sometimes. At one point, he said that he saw, after 9/11, he saw Muslims in New Jersey celebrating when the World Trade Center went down. Well, that's been refuted by everybody and their cousin. Nobody saw anybody celebrating in the United States. Certainly, he may have seen, I don't know, something on television, and it created a false memory in his mind that it was happening in New Jersey when it was happening in Cairo or something, or Riyadh or whatever. Anyway, or Damascus. But false memories, 25% of respondents accepted the false memories, and that is really kind of tragic. The ability of implanting false memories clouds the accuracy of such controversial memory formation as recovered memories of childhood sexual or physical abuse, delivered testimony that has been acquired from intensive questioning in a criminal trial also has questionable accuracies. And of course, when we're concentrating on something, let's say that somebody pulls a gun on somebody else and then somebody gets shot. And we witnessed everything that happened. Well, what's the probability that you saw what was going on? What's the probability that you heard what the conversation going on, and that it was accurate? The reality is that when something happens, we are drawn to that topic. We start focusing on whatever it is that is most important to us. So if we're watching two guys yelling at each other, and all of a sudden one of them pulls a gun. All we see is the gun, and we start concentrating on the gun. Well, there may be a lot of things happening around them, but we don't see that, and this is known as selective attention. And I have examples of selective attention. I know last time I went to sleep when I showed you a film, but I'll try to stay awake this time, okay? Anyway, selective attention. Here we go.
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count? The correct answer is 15 passes. But did you see the gorilla? This video is from research by Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris and is copyrighted. It is available for use in talks, training, and teaching on DVDs from VizCog Productions. Learn more at theinvisiblegorilla.com.
Okay, interesting stuff, huh? So you didn't see the gorilla. Wait, I don't want to.
The monkey business illusion.
No, I don't want to show you that. Okay. Anyway, I showed this to my wife, and she didn't see the gorilla, and she got mad at me because I showed her the film, and she didn't see the gorilla until, of course, it came back. So let's do another one. So I hope you don't get mad at me just because you couldn't see the gorilla. Let's try another one. Selective attention. Maybe. There we go.
This is a test of selective attention. Count every time a new exclamation point comes on screen.
Now it's time for our wrap-up. Let's give it everything we've got. Ready? Begin.
Artificial amateurs aren't it all amazing? Analytically, I assault, animate things. Broken barriers bounded by the bombie. Buildings are broken, basically I'm bombarding. Casually create catastrophes, casualties, canceling cats, got the canopies collapsing. Detonate a diamond tank, daily doing dope. Demonstrations, Don Dada on the down low. Eating other editors with each and every energetic, epileptic episode, elevated etiquette. Furious, fat, fabulous, fantastic. Flurries of funk felt feeding the fanatics. You've got great global goods gone glorious. Welcome to intermission. Yeah, intermission.
Now it's time for our wrap-up. Let's give it everything we've got. Ready? Begin.
Artificial amateurs aren't it all amazing? Analytically, I assault, animate things. Broken barriers bounded by the bombie. Buildings are broken, basically I'm bombarding. Casually create catastrophes, casualties, canceling cats, got the canopies collapsing. Detonate a diamond tank, daily doing dope. Demonstrations, Don Dada on the down low. Eating other editors with each and every energetic, epileptic episode, elevated etiquette. Furious, fat, fabulous, fantastic. Flurries of funk felt feeding the fanatics. You've got great global goods gone glorious. Getting godly in this game with the glorious. Hit 'em high, hella hype, historic. Oh, hey, Holocaust hymns, hear 'em holler at your homeboy. Imitators idolize, I intimidate. In an instant, I'll rise in an irate state. Two storm my jams like Jerry Crow's jocking joints. Just
Okay, that was fun. Okay, I got one more for you. Wait a minute. This is a commercial, actually an advertisement in England.
To test just how much attention the attention-stealing design of the new Skoda Fabia actually steals, we left one parked on this ordinary road in West London. We wanted to see if its sharp crystalline shapes, bold lines, and lower, wider profile would attract the desired level of attention. Will the 17-inch black alloy wheels stop passers-by in their tracks? Will the angular headlights attract the attention of other road users? Will a crowd gather to check out its fresh, sporty look? Well, not quite. But did the attention-stealing design distract you from noticing that the entire street has been changing right before your very eyes? Don't believe us? Have another look. Did you spot the van changing to a taxi? How about the scooter changing to a pair of bicycles? Or the lady holding a pig? Let alone the fact that the entire street is now completely different. Didn't think so.
Okay, selective attention. When we focus on something, then what happens is we don't notice what's going on around us. And let me see if I can get this. There we go. Memory is formed around the structure of our senses. Attributes of memory include time, space, sensory perceptions, response, cognitive effect of the stimuli. Each attribute seems to utilize different neural structures. From studies of brain imaging and memory, as well as evidence from brain damage due to injury and disease, scientists have been able to map different memory processes. Spatial location occurs in your hippocampus, memory of our own response in the caudate, object recognition in the extrastriate visual cortex. The hippocampus occurs, the spatial location is in the hippocampus. And this, of course, is, oops, I don't have my, wait a minute. Let me turn this thing off and then turn it back on. And let's see if I get my arrow back. Here's your hippocampus right here. Hippocampus right there. And caudate nucleus, that is your caudate nucleus. As you can see, it's right there. It's right there. Caudate nucleus. A normal caudate regulates emotional messages from the frontal lobe. A damaged caudate nucleus has diminished regulatory ability. And this is your caudate right here. When functioning properly, the caudate may allow only a little bit of frustration to travel to the frontal lobes as a reaction to an upsetting situation, such as lima beans for dinner. However, a damaged caudate may leave the gate open for too long, allowing a great deal of frustration to travel to the frontal lobes, which may result in an extremely intense emotional response to lima beans for dinner. Too much, allows too much emotion to get to your frontal lobe. The caudate relays information to the frontal lobe, and then we talked about this before. Do I need to get a haircut? I see that my hair is long. Damaged caudate, no, okay. An undamaged caudate nucleus regulates and organizes information received from other areas of the brain, such as the occipital lobe, responsible for vision, and transmits the information to the frontal lobes. The frontal lobes then instruct another area of the brain to carry out a particular task based on the transmitted information. A damaged caudate, on the other hand, may not properly deliver the information to the frontal lobes. The result, unawareness, may mean that particular tasks, such as getting a haircut, is not carried out. Caudate is secretary. A caudate may work much like a secretary in that it is responsible for regulating and organizing messages or information for the boss. If the secretary gives the boss a stack of unorganized mail and telephone messages, he or she may be unable to manage the incoming messages efficiently and become overwhelmed. Whereas a damaged caudate can lead to slowed thought processing, undamaged caudate enables the frontal lobes to perform quickly and efficiently. And of course, this is the way we want our messages to be organized, not this way, where he has no idea which is important and which isn't. Extrastriatal visual cortex, that's where we recognize objects. Visual cortex, this is in the back of your brain, of course, and this is your visual cortex right here. Memory formation and use involves 3 stages. The first stage is encoding. You encode information in 2 different ways, either through iconic memory as pictures, or echoic memory or as sounds. This occurs in the iconic memory occurs in the right prefrontal cortex and the parahippocampal cortex in both hemispheres. Echoic memory or sounds are encoded in the left prefrontal cortex and the left parahippocampal cortex. Iconic memory, there you go. That's where it's stored. This is the front of your brain on the right side. Echoic memory is on the left side. There we go. Memory formation and use. Okay, we're talking about consolidation now. So you encode and then you consolidate. Consolidate takes time to place information from the intermediate memory to long-term memory. The hippocampal system is part of the process, but not a repository for long-term memories. Memories are further processed in the medial temporal region and probably the midline diencephalic region. LTM, long-term memory, takes place in various regions of your cortex. And this is one of the reasons why when you have brain surgery, if you stimulate a certain area of the brain, you'll get different memories, as weird as that sounds. So if you touch an electrode to, I don't know, from one part of the brain on your left side, you'll get a memory. And if you do the same thing on your right side, you'll get a different memory. So they're stored all over your cortex, and that's, of course, the outer covering of your brain, the outer 1/4 inch of your brain. Consolidation takes place all over the place. Memory formation, the last is retrieval, so you encode the information, you consolidate the information so it goes into your long-term memory. Now we need to get it out. You're on jeopardy, and of course you need to remember all this information, so you need to retrieve it. During retrieval, the area of the cortex that is used for that type of memory is activated, hopefully. Researchers have discovered that emotion often enhances memory. However, emotion can weaken information that is not central to the emotional theme. Memory seems to be enhanced by the beta-adrenergic stress hormones. Research indicates that emotional stories are easier to learn. This is because stress hormones from the adrenal glands activated by the emotions activate beta-adrenergic receptors. This is why memories of trauma are so readily remembered. To exacerbate the problem for some sufferers of post-traumatic stress disorder, for example, remembering the trauma causes the stress hormones to be activated, which causes stimulation, which in turn, of course, reinforces the bad memories to occur again. And this is one of the reasons why you have memories that you can't get rid of. Your bad memories you can't get rid of. Now, strangely enough, throughout my life, I've never really had a problem with too much PTSD. I've had a little bit. I've been through some pretty traumatic things, but I tend to not remember bad things. I only remember I only remember good. I never remember bad. As weird as that sounds, a lot of people they focus on the bad and they can't remember the good, or they don't think about the good. They only think about the bad. But I'm the opposite. I don't remember all the bad things, and sometimes I'll remember, oh, that happened to me. I broke my arm, didn't I? But the traumatic part of it just doesn't stick for some reason. One hypothesis of post-traumatic stress disorder is that since the memory has established by the adrenergic stress hormones, it was remembered better. When this memory is recalled either by intrusive memory or flashback, the memory is reintroduced, and so it is reinforced. By administering anti-adrenergic drugs soon after the incident, it would reduce the impact of intrusive thoughts and flashbacks. Now, this is what they tried to do in Iraq and Afghanistan. They thought that they could keep the soldiers that were in combat from getting PTSD by giving them an anti-adrenergic drug. It only worked in select cases. What we've discovered in Vietnam was about 1/3 of the combat veterans from Vietnam developed fairly severe PTSD, and the other 2/3 didn't. So what was causing a select group of individuals to experience PTSD, and why didn't the other guys develop PTSD? Looking at combat records from Vietnam, researchers determined that individuals who had suffered from traumas as a child were more likely to develop PTSD post-combat. In other words, the pathways, the memory pathways, had been established as children. Now, as children, of course, they didn't understand the trauma. They didn't understand why it was happening to them. As adults, of course, they could understand. They were in combat, but because the trauma was utilizing the same pathway that it had utilized from the childhood trauma, the result was that they couldn't figure out why it was happening or why it did happen. The adults who suffered the same trauma would get PTSD to some extent, to a minor extent, but it wouldn't be nearly as intense as the individuals who had suffered childhood trauma. And the reason is because the new trauma was being put in the same place as the childhood trauma, and that childhood trauma was a confused trauma. They couldn't figure out why, and so that's the basic reason that that some combat traumas are worse than others if the individual has suffered a childhood trauma. This may be because individuals who have suffered from trauma as children have already established the beta-adrenergic memory pathway, as I said before. Drugs such as propranolol, which suppresses beta-adrenergic activity, might be used before or directly after the trauma to prevent such pathways from forming. We tried this in Iraq and Afghanistan. It did not work with everybody. It worked with some people, but it didn't work with everybody. Let me give you an example. I have three brothers, and we were born between 1947 and 1954, and all four of us went to Vietnam, but only one of us developed PTSD. And the one that developed PTSD was my brother, who had rheumatic fever when he was in the second grade. The rheumatic fever was traumatic enough, but he had to stay out of school for a whole year. And because of that, a lot of strange things happened to him that year. He developed a speech impediment. And when he went back, he didn't have friends. The people that were his friends in the first grade were not his friends in the third grade, as it turned out. So it was fairly traumatic for him. He had that, and he was actually in more severe combat than any of the others of us. But the rest of us didn't really develop. Maybe, it's fairly minor. Mine is relatively minor. But his is fairly severe, to the extent that when he came back and he got out of the service, he armed himself and he built rifle pits around our property. We owned a farm, and he built rifle pits around the property. And one time, so he's got this rifle pit, and I didn't realize what was going on. But we needed to stop the creek from eroding. It was eroding into our field, so I took the rocks from his rifle pit and I put it on the bank, and he went ballistic. He just went insane because I had messed up his rifle pit, and he was maintaining all these fields of fire and whatnot. Anyway. His PTSD is a lot more severe than anybody else's in the family. And my dad was in World War II. My dad's PTSD had to do with second-story windows, because he landed at D-Day, and they went all the way through France and into Belgium, and then finally into Germany. But he wasn't an infantryman. He was a signal corps. He was in the signal corps, and so the infantry would come in and they would clean out a village, and then the signal corps would come in and to lay the wires from they were right behind the front lines, and they would run the wires. But what the Germans would do? They would leave snipers. They would leave snipers in the village to disrupt whatever came afterwards. So the infantry would come in, they would sweep through, and they would clean everything out as best they could, and then they'd take off, and then a holding company would come in, and the signal corps. Then all the secondary, second tier individuals would come through, and a lot of times they were under sniper fire, and usually the sniper fire was from up above. A lot of times it was in the church steeple, like as you saw in Private Ryan. I'm glad he didn't see that movie. Or it was from a second story window, anything with a second story window. So he had this problem with second story windows. That was my dad. Anyway, why are we talking about this? Medial, temporal, hippocampal, and diencephalic systems are needed to form new declarative long-term memories. These areas are activated in both encoding and retrieval of declarative memories. Sensory motor skills such as mirror tracing, basal ganglia, cerebellum, and motor cortex. Cognitive skills such as the towers of Hanoi cerebral cortex. I will show you what the towers of Hanoi is. This is a game. You have 3 posts. What you are supposed to do is move all of these blue things off of here, and you need to move this whole stack onto another post, one by moving these one at a time. Now the rules are that you can't have a larger disk on top of a smaller disk. So in this case, you'd move the first one on C, and then you move the second one on B. Then you would move the small one on B, so that it's on top of this one. Then you take this one off and you put it on here. Then you'd put the small one here. Then you'd put that one here. Then you'd put take this one off and put it here. Yeah. Anyway, what you have to do is you have to move that whole stack and put it on another stack, and it gets fairly involved. Those are the towers of Hanoi. Doesn't have anything to do with Vietnam. I don't remember this this test was there before we were fighting in the war in Vietnam. Perceptual skills, learning to read mirror reversed text. That happens in your occipital lobe activation. And there you go. There's some backwards text. Oh, hello there. I didn't see you come in. I was too busy reading off this teleprompter. It does some pretty cool things. You can edit your scripts on the page, or copy paste them here to import them. IMQORT, import. I don't know. Import them from another program. Import. Anyway, you can read that later. There appears to be a degree of decline in the ability to learn and remember as humans age. How much decline depends on heredity, education, and activity levels of the individual. Actually, the elderly are able to recall memories as long as the memory cues are adequate, and that's usually the problem. They don't have the same memory cues that you do. A good example is I'm 71 years old. I'm still teaching college. I have a sister that is a year older than I am. She's 18 months older than I am. She's starting to suffer from dementia, and the reason is because she hasn't stayed intellectually active. I can't remember things from time to time, nothing important yet. Sometimes it's words like treponema pallidum on the last lecture, but I seem to be doing a little bit better, mainly because I have more education than she does. I have 5 degrees and she has none, and my activity levels, I just walked. How far did I walk this morning? I don't know, about 3.5 miles this morning. Anyway, I'm still active and she doesn't do hardly anything. Anyway, and of course my heredity's better than, no, our heredity's the same. Anyway, so there you go. I don't look like this anymore. My hair is whiter. No, it's not whiter than that. That guy's probably a little older than I am. Anyway, that's it. That's the end of the year, actually. That's the last lecture. It's been a pleasure. I hope I haven't irritated anybody too much. I will get this last quiz up before the end of the weekend, and then you guys can finish it off. Don't as soon as you're done with the quizzes, with your article critiques, with your paper, then you're done. You're done with the class. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed presenting it to you, well, good luck and stay safe. I guess that is it.